I discovered my husband's mistress loved to swim in our pool while I was pulling long shifts, day and night. At the hospital, they thought they were clever, that I'd never suspect a thing. So, I decided to prepare a little surprise for her, one that would be truly unforgettable. I placed hundreds of tiny, underwater guests, ready to give her a warm welcome. But before I continue my story of betrayal, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to know. My name is Dr. Evelyn Reed. I'm 42 years old, and for a long time, I believed I had everything a woman could ever want. A solid career as a cardiac surgeon, a seemingly happy 5-year marriage to Liam, and a dream house in the Boston suburbs, with a pool that looked like it was pulled from the pages of an architectural magazine. Liam was a successful architect, charming, one of those men who knows exactly what to say to win anyone over. We were admired by our friends, the perfect couple everyone envied. But perfection, as I discovered in the worst way possible, is sometimes just a well-constructed facade. My routine was intense. Long shifts at Massachusetts General, emergency surgeries, consultations that stretched late into the night. Liam had always seemed so understanding. He'd say he admired my dedication, that he was proud to have such a determined wife. When I'd come home, exhausted, he would be there with a welcoming smile, a massage for my shoulders, and dinner ready on the table. He was the model husband, or at least that's what I thought. He had designed our home himself, every line and angle a testament to his talent. Our life in Maple Creek was supposed to be idyllic, a peaceful retreat from the chaos of my job, the sprawling backyard, the stone patio, the crystal-clear saltwater pool. It was our sanctuary, his masterpiece, and my prison. The first time something felt wrong was on a rainy Tuesday. I came home from the hospital earlier than usual, around 6 p.m., a rare occurrence in my schedule. As I parked my car in the garage, I noticed the lights in the pool area were on, which wasn't unusual for a gray day like that one. I walked in through the kitchen door and called out for Liam, but there was no answer. I walked through to the living room, and through the glass sliding doors that led to the backyard. I saw a scene that left me confused. There were 2 towels draped over the lounge chairs by the pool. They were both still damp. The water in the pool had small ripples, as if someone had just gotten out. Just then, Liam appeared, walking out of the downstairs bathroom with his hair wet. I asked him about the towels. "Oh, I decided to go for a quick swim to relax," he said, kissing my forehead with a practiced naturalness. "You know how stressful work has been." I accepted the explanation, but something didn't quite fit. Liam had never been much of a swimmer. He always preferred the gym, and 2 towels for one person. When I pointed that out, he just laughed. "I used one for my hair and one for my body. Evie, you know how I am." It made sense, or at least I wanted it to. I was tired, my mind still replaying the delicate sutures I had placed in a patient's aorta just hours before. It was easier to believe his simple explanation than to entertain the ugly alternative that was whispering at the edge of my mind. But that little whisper grew louder in the weeks that followed. Small details started to form a disturbing pattern. Liam developed a sudden, obsessive interest in the pool's maintenance. He was out there daily, cleaning the filters, vacuuming the bottom even when the water was pristine, testing the chemical levels with a frequency that bordered on manic. For a man who used to barely pay attention to the landscaping, this newfound dedication was, at best, suspicious. It was as if he was trying to wash away some kind of evidence, to keep the water so pure that it couldn't hold any secrets. One night, I came home from a late shift, the clock on my dashboard glowing to a.m. As I walked into our bedroom, I smelled a different scent in the air. It wasn't my perfume, a classic rose and sandalwood, nor was it the usual clean scent of our laundry detergent. It was something floral and sweet, delicate, and distinctly feminine. I mentioned it to Liam the next morning, trying to sound casual. "Did you change something in the house? I smelled something different last night." He barely looked up from his newspaper. "Must be the new fabric softener the cleaning lady started using," he mumbled. But I knew our cleaning lady only came on Thursdays, and this had been a Tuesday. Another lie to add to the growing list of inconsistencies. Each one felt like a small paper cut, insignificant on its own, but together, they were starting to bleed. Liam's behavior also changed, subtly at first, but it was noticeable. Before, when I came home from those grueling night shifts, he would greet me with warm kisses, ask about my day, and show genuine interest in the lives I had fought to save. Now, He barely lifted his head when I walked in, murmuring a distracted hey before turning his attention back to his phone. When I tried to talk, he brushed me off or claimed he was tired. His nights out also became more frequent and vague. I'm meeting with some clients. I need to check out a property. A supplier dinner. They were always plausible excuses, but they started to sound manufactured. Hello. And then there were the mysterious phone calls. When his cell phone rang, he would step away to answer it, speaking in a low voice, sometimes laughing in a way I hadn't heard him direct at me in months. The intimacy in his hushed tones was a dagger to my heart. He was sharing a part of himself with someone else. A part that used to belong to me. The trust that had been the foundation of our marriage was eroding, grain by grain, and I was standing by, watching it happen, feeling utterly powerless. One rare evening, I found myself home alone with some free time. A small miracle. I decided to channel my restless energy into something productive, to tackle one of those deep cleaning projects you always put off. I gathered some cleaning supplies and headed to the outdoor pool house, which had its own small bathroom that we rarely ever used. As I pushed open the door, the smell of old disinfectant and damp air hit me. I started tidying up, straightening towels, shaking out the rug, emptying the small trash can. And that's when, as I bent down to wipe the shower floor, my eyes caught something in the drain. It took a few seconds for my brain to register what I was seeing. Tangled in the metal grate, like stubborn pieces of evidence, were several strands of hair. They were long, blonde, and fine. Nothing like my own hair, which is a dark, thick brunette cut just above my shoulders. In that instant, my body went cold. It felt like time had stopped. With trembling hands, I opened the vanity cabinet below the sink, looking for an old rag, trying to convince myself I was just there to clean, nothing more. But what I found inside that cabinet stole the ground from beneath my feet. 3 small objects, left behind like breadcrumbs from a parallel story I knew nothing about. A red bikini. A vibrant, almost aggressive shade of scarlet that had never been mine. The fabric still slightly damp to the touch. A bottle of perfume with a sweet, cloying scent that I had never worn in my life. And finally, a small, delicate gold earring. The kind that looks like it was forgotten on purpose. I just stood there, staring at those objects as if they were the physical ghosts of a truth I didn't want to face. My chest felt heavy, my breathing shallow, and yet I couldn't move. Every detail of those belongings screamed everything Liam never had the courage to say. You are being cheated on. The pain was immediate and visceral. A physical blow. It was the confirmation of what, deep down, I had already sensed but refused to accept. And there, in that forgotten bathroom, amidst strange sense and undeniable proof, I realized that my life had just been shattered into a million pieces. The impact was instantaneous. A mixture of white-hot fury and disbelief burned inside me. How long had this been going on? Since when had my home, the sanctuary I had built with so much love and care, become the stage for such a blatant betrayal? And Liam, the man I had trusted blindly, the husband who had promised me fidelity, was now a stranger. A coward. A cheat. I clenched the perfume bottle in my hand, my knuckles turning white, wanting to smash it against the wall. My first instinct was to storm out and confront him immediately, to throw those objects in his face, demand an explanation, scream if I had to. But then, something held me back. A cold, clear thought cut through the emotional storm. If I exploded right now, this affair would end in the most predictable way possible. Liam would deny everything. He would invent cheap excuses. Maybe even try to turn the situation around to make me look crazy or possessive. He had a gift for that. For twisting reality until you started to doubt your own sanity. He would play the victim, swear it was all a misunderstanding. And in the end, the story might conclude without the punishment he truly deserved. No, that was too easy. That was letting him off the hook. Liam didn't deserve a simple argument. He deserved something much bigger. Something that would make him regret every single night of his betrayal. Every mocking laugh he shared with that woman at the expense of my trust. I had always believed that the worst part of being cheated on wasn't the act itself, but the feeling of being made a fool of. The knowledge that while I was working through the night, saving lives to provide us with a comfortable existence, Liam was entertaining another woman in my own home. In my pool? Probably in my bed. In the days that followed, I maintained a facade of normalcy. I greeted Liam in the morning, left for work, and came back at the usual times. But inside, I was simmering. Every fake smile he gave me, every hollow "how was your day?" Honey, fueled my thirst for justice. This wasn't just about ending a marriage anymore. This was about reclaiming my dignity. This was about making sure that when this was all over, he would never forget what it felt like to underestimate me. My mind, the same mind that could navigate the complex network of human arteries and veins, was now focused on a different kind of procedure. A precise, calculated extraction of the poison that had infected my life, and I would be the surgeon. One morning, I awoke long before the sun touched the windows. The room was still dark, and everything seemed to calm for the hurricane raging inside my chest. I turned my head and watched Liam sleeping soundly beside me, his breathing light and even. Anyone seeing him there would never imagine the kind of man he truly was. For 5 years, I had believed I was sharing my life with a partner, someone trustworthy and loyal, who waited for me at home while I spent entire nights at the hospital. But now, looking at him in this new, harsh light, all I could see was a traitor. Someone who constructed lies with the same ease with which he smiled. And worse, he was so certain he would never be discovered. He was peaceful, confident that his mistress, the one who felt comfortable enough to swim in my pool, could return at any moment to enjoy herself a little more. It was there, in that bitter silence, that an idea began to form within me. An idea as dark and murky as the bottom of a neglected pond. I was going to serve him back a taste of his own poison. I was going to prepare a little surprise for his lover. My hands were surprisingly steady as I carefully placed the scarlet bikini back into the vanity, folding it just as I had found it. I wiped my fingerprints from the perfume bottle and set it back next to the bikini. I even took the tiny gold earring and dropped it back into the corner of the cabinet. I closed the door, making no sound. I needed everything to seem untouched. My discovery had to remain my secret, a weapon I would keep sharpened and hidden until the perfect moment to strike. I walked out of the pool house bathroom, locked the door behind me, and slipped the key back onto its hook in the kitchen. The house was silent, unaware of the war that had just been declared within its walls. Living with him after that was an exercise in supreme self-control. I became an actress worthy of an Oscar. I smiled when he kissed me goodbye in the morning. I asked about his day when he came home at night. I listened to his fabricated stories about difficult clients and zoning permits, nodding with feigned interest while my mind catalogued every lie, every inconsistency. Every touch felt like a violation. Every term of endearment, every I love you, Evie, was a drop of acid on my soul. He was a ghost in my house, and I was a ghost in my own life. We moved around each other, two strangers performing a stale play for an audience of no one. The anger was a living thing inside me, a cold, heavy stone in my stomach, but I couldn't let it show. My face had to remain a calm mask, the professional, slightly weary face of a surgeon. At the hospital, I channeled my rage into focus. I performed a complex triple bypass with hands that didn't shake, my mind finding a strange clarity in the high-stakes precision of my work. I could control life and death in the operating room. Surely, I could control this. I could orchestrate a conclusion that was fitting, just, and absolute. But first, I needed to know who she was. The woman who wore a scarlet bikini and smelled of jasmine and sandalwood. The woman who was careless enough to leave her earring behind. Liam was an architect of lies. But even the most skilled architect leaves behind a blueprint. I just needed to find it. I started looking. Not frantically, but methodically. The way I would review a patient's chart for a subtle anomaly. The first clue came a week later. I was gathering laundry, and as I emptied the pockets of Liam's jeans, my fingers brushed against a crumpled piece of paper. It was a receipt, not for a fancy dinner or a secret gift, but for 2 green smoothies from a place called Zen Garden Wellness Cafe. The location was in Cambridge, not far from a new construction site he was supposedly overseeing. That was plausible, but the date and time were what caught my eye. It was from the Tuesday I had come home early and found the 2 wet towels. He hadn't been swimming alone. He had been entertaining. That night, after he fell asleep, I took my laptop to the living room. The glow of the screen felt conspiratorial in the dark house. I looked up the Zen Garden Wellness Cafe. It was exactly what I expected, sleek, modern, with a menu full of kale and quinoa. On their website, they had a partners page, linking to local businesses they recommended. One of them was a high-end yoga studio just 2 blocks away, Serenity Flow. My heart began to beat faster. I clicked the link. The studio's website was filled with images of serene, flexible people in expensive athletic wear. I went to the instructor's page. My eyes scanned the smiling faces. And then they stopped. There she was. Long, fine blonde hair, a dazzlingly white smile, and eyes that held a certain smug confidence. Her name was Chloe Saunders. Her bio said she specialized in hot yoga and mindful sensuality. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. She was the picture of health and wellness. Yet she was a cancer in my life. My fingers flew across the keyboard as I typed her name into a social media search bar. Her profile was public. Of course it was. She was the kind of person who needed an audience. The page was a curated gallery of her life, gravity-defying yoga poses, inspirational quotes laid over sunset backgrounds, and photos of her perfectly toned body in an array of bikinis. I scrolled, my stomach twisting with each image, and then I found it. It was a post from 3 weeks ago. A picture of her, laughing, lounging on an inflatable swan. She was wearing the scarlet bikini. The photo was cropped tightly on her, but it wasn't tight enough. In the background, I could see it. The distinctive gray slate tiling of my patio, the corner of the white lounge chair Liam had picked out, and the deep blue water of my pool. My saltwater pool. She had geotagged the location, but not as Maple Creek. She had cheekily tagged it as a private oasis. I stared at the image until my eyes burned. The audacity. The sheer, unadulterated arrogance of it. She wasn't just sleeping with my husband. She was inhabiting my life, using my home as her personal resort, and then broadcasting it to the world as her own little secret paradise. The anger that had been simmering inside me for weeks finally boiled over. But it didn't come out as a scream. It transformed into something colder, sharper. It crystallized into a plan. The pool. It had been their playground, their secret meeting spot, the heart of my home. The place I went to find peace after a long day had been defiled. They had taken something clean and pure and made it dirty. So, the pool would be the stage for my revenge. It was poetic. It was just. Chloe loved my pool so much. Loved feeling the clean, clear water against her skin. I decided I would give her a new swimming experience. One that was a little more natural. A little more teeming with life. I thought about frogs. The thought came to me suddenly, and with absolute clarity. Frogs were a plague in the old stories. A symbol of something primal and unsettling emerging from the depths. They were slimy, unpredictable, the opposite of the sterile perfection Chloe seemed to worship. It was perfect. She and Liam had treated my home like their personal swamp, a place for their dirty secrets. So I would give them a real swamp. I closed the laptop. The image of Chloe's smiling face in my pool burned into my memory. The hurt was still there, a deep, throbbing ache in my chest. But now, it was accompanied by something else, a grim sense of purpose. I was no longer a victim in the story. I was the director, and I was about to set the stage for the final act. I walked into my study and sat down at my desk. I opened a new browser window. My fingers, which had spent the day suturing human hearts, now typed a new set of search terms: American bullfrog tadpoles for sale, amphibian suppliers, New England, how to create a thriving pond ecosystem. A small, cold smile touched my lips for the first time in weeks. The surgeon was ready to operate. Liam and Chloe thought they were swimming in a private oasis. They had no idea they were about to be introduced to the true residents of the swamp they had created. During my lunch break a few days later, I drove to a specialized aquatic store on the other side of the city. It was a large, humid building with enormous tanks full of exotic fish and a dedicated section for amphibians. The air smelled of damp earth and treated water. The attendant, a young guy with a pierced eyebrow and an enthusiastic demeanor, greeted me. "Can I help you with something? I'm working on a special project," I said, keeping my tone professional, the same one I use when consulting with residents of the hospital. "I need bullfrog tadpoles. A lot of them." He arched his pierced eyebrow. "How many exactly?" "Around 300 units. At least." "Wow," he said, impressed. "That must be for a very large pond." I smiled. A thin, controlled smile. "Something like that." He led me to the tanks in the back, where hundreds of tadpoles swam in murky water. They were larger than I had expected, some already beginning to develop their back legs perfect for what I had in mind. They were dark, wriggling commas of life, full of potential. My potential. "I'll take all of these," I said, pointing to the fullest tank. "And I was wondering if you have any adult frogs as well." The young man was even more intrigued now, but his professionalism kept him from asking too many questions. A few minutes later, I was carrying a large styrofoam cooler filled with sloshing water and tadpoles, and 2 separate plastic bags, each containing an impressive adult bullfrog. They were large animals, about 8 inches long, with dark, mottled green skin and an appearance that was anything but friendly. Their unblinking eyes seemed to hold ancient secrets. They were perfect. On the way home, I stopped at a pool supply store and bought a heavy-duty black opaque tarp, the kind used to cover pools during the winter. I needed to ensure my surprise remained hidden until the right moment. I arrived home before Liam, who was supposedly at a late meeting with clients. My heart was pounding, a steady, rhythmic beat against my ribs, as I carried my acquisitions into the backyard. It wasn't a nervous beat, but the focused rhythm of a surgeon before the first incision. I lifted the heavy cooler and poured the tadpoles into the pool. They scattered into the water like tiny dark torpedoes, some sinking to the bottom, others swimming near the surface. Next, with more care, I released the 2 adult frogs. They floated for a moment, their powerful legs tensed, before diving deep, disappearing into the blue depths. From a distance, the pool looked perfectly normal. The water was still clear and inviting. Only a closer look would reveal the shadows moving beneath the surface. My new guests were settling in. Then, I unrolled the black tarp, stretching it across the entire length of the pool, securing the edges tightly. To any casual observer, it would look like the pool was simply being protected for a cleaning or maintenance. A perfectly normal, responsible thing to do. When Liam arrived around 7 p.m., he found me in the kitchen, preparing dinner as if it were any other day. The scent of roasted chicken filled the air, a picture of domestic tranquility. He walked over and kissed my cheek, a gesture that now felt cold and rehearsed. "Why'd you cover the pool?" he asked, his voice laced with a clear note of disappointment. I turned from the stove, my expression carefully neutral. "There's a forecast for heavy rain over the next few days." I lied smoothly. "I don't want it to fill up with debris. You're always saying how important it is to keep the water clean." I threw his own obsessive words back at him. It was a masterful touch, I thought. He seemed to accept the explanation, but I saw the discontent in his eyes. He had probably already arranged another rendezvous with Chloe. Now he would have to cancel or find another location. A flicker of frustration crossed his face before he masked it with a sigh. "You're right. Of course. Always so practical." The compliment felt like an insult. He saw me as practical, reliable, predictable Evelyn. He had no idea what I was capable of. During dinner, I made sure to casually mention that I had picked up an extra shift on Thursday night. "They need me for a complex transplant," I said, watching his reaction over the rim of my wine glass. "I'll probably be home Friday morning." The relief on his face was immediate, though he tried to hide it. "That's a shame, honey. But you know how proud I am of your work." Hypocrite. I could almost see the gears turning in his head, planning how to take advantage of my absence. My house, my pool, my Thursday night. He thought it all belonged to him, to do with as he pleased. The chicken I was eating tasted like ash in my mouth, but I forced myself to swallow, to smile, to play my part. The performance had to be flawless. On Thursday, I got ready for my shift. I put on my scrubs, packed a bag, and kissed Liam goodbye at the door. "See you tomorrow, darling," I said, my voice sweet as honey. "Don't wait up for me." He murmured something about staying in and watching a movie, but I knew what his real plans were. I drove towards the hospital, but instead of taking the exit, I continued on, circling back to my own neighborhood. I parked my car on a parallel street, a spot shaded by a large oak tree, where I had a clear view of the entrance to our house without being seen. Then, I settled in to wait. I didn't have to wait long. Around 9:30 p.m., a silver Honda Civic pulled up in front of our gate. Chloe got out of the car. She was wearing a short white dress that looked more like a second skin than a piece of clothing. She carried a colorful beach bag and walked with the unearned confidence of someone who felt she owned the situation. Liam opened the door for her with a warm embrace. Even from a distance, I could see the intimacy between them. The way his hands rested on her back, the way she tilted her head back to laugh at something he said. It was sickening, but it was also fuel for my resolve. They went inside, and the lights in the living room came on. I could see their silhouettes through the large bay window, chatting, drinking wine, acting like a couple in love. My stomach churned, a bitter mix of jealousy and rage, but I held myself steady. The show was about to begin. 20 minutes later, the backyard lights flickered on. It was time. Liam appeared in the pool area carrying 2 wine glasses and an ice bucket. Chloe followed close behind, already changed into the scarlet bikini I had found in the pool house bathroom. It was even more jarring to see it on her. A flash of red against her tan skin. She walked with a sway in her hips, clearly showing off for him, believing herself to be the epitome of seduction. Finally, I heard Chloe exclaim, her voice carrying on the quiet night air. She stretched her arms above her head. I've been dying to get back in here. Liam placed the drinks on the small table next to the pool and began to pull back the heavy black tarp. I thought we were going to have to cancel because of this thing, he said, grunting with the effort. But I managed to convince Evie I could take care of it without her noticing. Chloe laughed. A high, sharp sound that grated on my nerves. She's so naive. Isn't she? Such a brilliant doctor. But she can't see what's happening in her own house. It's better this way, Liam said, folding the tarp. It makes our lives easier. They toasted with their wine glasses. And then Chloe began to descend slowly down the pool steps. The water was the perfect temperature, and she sighed with pleasure as she submerged her body. This is heaven, she called out, swimming on her back, her blonde hair fanning out around her. This pool is an absolute dream. And that's when the fun began. Chloe was showing off, making graceful, languid movements in the water, when she felt something brush against her leg. At first, she paid it no mind. Pools always have small bits of debris, leaves, things like that. But then she felt it again, and then again. A soft, slippery touch that was gone as quickly as it came. She paused, treading water, a slight frown creasing her brow. Liam, she called out, her voice a little less confident now. Is there something weird in the water? He was reclining on one of the lounge chairs, admiring her. What kind of weird? He asked, taking a sip of his wine. I don't know. It feels like something is moving down here. Liam sat up, a flicker of annoyance on his face. He was the self-proclaimed pool expert now. Any imperfection was a personal affront. He walked to the edge of the pool, peering into the illuminated water. The submerged lights cast an ethereal blue glow, but it was still difficult to see details at the bottom. It's probably just the jets circulating, he said, dismissing her concern. Everything's fine. Chloe continued to swim, but her discomfort was growing. Small things kept touching her body, her legs, her arms, her stomach. They were gentle touches, but they were constant and unnerving. It was like swimming through invisible, ghostly cobwebs. She stopped again, this time standing up in the shallower end. Her breath was coming a little faster. Are you sure there's nothing wrong with this pool? She asked, her voice tight. I'm telling you, Liam, there's something in here. It was at that moment that she saw one. A tadpole, about an inch long, swam right in front of her face, its tail wriggling frantically. It was followed by another, and then another. Her eyes widened in horror. She let out a small gasp, a choked sound of disgust. Oh my God, she whispered, trying to back away. There are things swimming in here. Liam rushed to the control panel on the wall and flipped a switch, increasing the power of the underwater lights. The pool instantly became brilliantly illuminated, every corner exposed. And what was revealed was a true aquatic nightmare. Hundreds of tadpoles were swimming in every direction. The water was alive with them. Near the filter, the two enormous bullfrogs were floating calmly, their bulging eyes seeming to stare directly at Chloe. For a moment, there was a stunned silence, broken only by the gentle lapping of the water. Then, Chloe's scream echoed through the entire neighborhood. It was a raw, piercing shriek of pure terror. She tried to scramble for the steps, but her feet slipped on the smooth bottom of the pool. She fell backward into the water with a huge splash, now in a full-blown panic. The tadpoles, startled by the sudden agitation, began to swim more frenetically, creating a chaotic, churning soup of amphibian life. The larger of the two frogs, spooked by the commotion, took a powerful leap. It landed squarely on her head, its cold, slimy body clinging to her wet hair for a second before it kicked off and disappeared back into the water. The contact sent her into a new wave of hysterics. Get me out of here, she shrieked, flailing her arms, swallowing water and coughing. Liam, for the love of God, do something. Liam was frozen at the edge of the pool, his face a mask of disbelief and confusion. He was trying to process what he was seeing. How had those animals gotten there? When? Why? His perfectly maintained, pristine pool had been transformed into a primordial swamp in a matter of hours. His mind couldn't compute it. It was in this moment of total chaos that I made my grand entrance. I walked calmly across the patio, my footsteps silent on the stone tiles, as if I were just arriving home from a long shift. My hands were clasped behind my back, and a serene smile decorated my face. "Good evening," I said, my voice as sweet as poison. "How are you two enjoying my pool?" Chloe, who was desperately trying to crawl out of the water while being pursued by a legion of tadpoles, froze when she saw me. Her eyes, already wide with terror, grew even wider. For a moment, she stopped struggling, simply staring at me with an expression of absolute shock. Liam, on the other hand, turned as white as a sheet. His mouth opened and closed several times, like a fish out of water, but no sound came out. The architect of lies was speechless. Surprised to see me, I continued, taking a few slow, deliberate steps toward the pool. "You imagined I'd be at the hospital all night, didn't you? Saving lives, while you two were here." Chloe finally managed to get to the steps and scrambled out of the water, stumbling and coughing. Her body was trembling, from both cold and terror. Tiny tadpoles were still clinging to her hair and the straps of her bikini. "You're crazy," she sputtered, trying to pick the wriggling creatures off of her. "What kind of person does something like this?" I tilted my head, as if I were genuinely considering her question. "What kind of person does this?" I repeated softly. "Well, I'd say it's a kind of person who discovered her husband has been cheating on her in her own home for the past 6 months. The kind of person who heard the two of you laughing at her expense, while you enjoyed everything she works so hard to maintain. That kind of person." Chloe's face went from white to red and then back to white again. She looked at Liam, expecting him to say something, to deny it, to explain. But he remained mute, staring at the ground as if he could will it to swallow him whole. "Liam," she called out, her voice trembling. He finally lifted his eyes, first to her, then to me. His expression was one of a trapped animal. "Evelyn," he began, his voice raspy. "I can explain." I let out a genuine, humorless laugh. "Explain? Oh, Liam, you don't need to explain anything. I already know everything. I know you've been meeting here for months. I know you laugh about me behind my back. I know she feels so comfortable that she mocks me while swimming in the pool that I pay for." I paused, letting the words hang in the air between us. Chloe opened her mouth to protest, but I turned my gaze on her, and my eyes were as sharp as scalpels. "And you," I said, pointing a finger at her. "You must be wondering how I found out. Well, my dear, doctors are observant people by nature, and after a while, it becomes difficult to ignore the signs, especially when you two are so careless." I let a small, cruel smile play on my lips. "Did you really think I wouldn't find your bikini? Your perfume? Your earring in my pool house bathroom?" The color drained completely from her face. She knew she was caught. I walked over to the lounge chair where a clean, dry towel was folded. I picked it up and threw it at her feet. "Get dressed and get out of my house. Now." She snatched the towel quickly, covering her body. But she hesitated. "What about my things?" "What things?" I asked innocently. "My clothes. My bag." I looked toward the table where her belongings were. "Oh, that." I walked over, picked up her designer beach bag, and with a flick of my wrist, tossed it into the middle of the pool. It landed with a soft splash and began to sink slowly among the tadpoles. "There. Now you have no more reason to stay." "You can't do that," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "I can," I said calmly. "And I just did. Now get out, or I'll call the police. I'll tell them there's an intruder on my property. Given your current state, I don't think they'll have any trouble believing me." Chloe looked one last time at Liam, a desperate, pleading look, hoping he would defend her. But he remained motionless, a statue of shame, with a final glare of pure hatred in my direction. She grabbed her wet dress from the ground and ran towards her car, still dripping, barefoot, and utterly humiliated. Liam and I were left alone, the silence of the night broken only by the soft sounds of the tadpoles moving in the water, and the distant echo of Chloe's car speeding down the street. The air was thick with unspoken words, with years of trust shattered in a single evening. The scent of chlorine mixed with the faint, earthy smell of the frogs, a bizarre perfume for the death of our marriage. "Evelyn," Liam began, his voice hesitant, fragile. Can we talk about this?" I walked over to where he stood, positioning myself directly in front of him. forcing him to meet my gaze. My eyes were cold and steady. The tearful, forgiving wife he might have been expecting was gone, replaced by someone he no longer recognized. Talk about what? Liam. About how you've been betraying me for months in my own house. About how you two laughed at my expense while I worked to support our life. About how you threw away 5 years of marriage for an affair with a yoga instructor who geotags her infidelity. He swallowed hard, the sound audible in the quiet night. I didn't want it to be like this. It just happened. It just happened. I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. I gave a slow, deliberate nod. How convenient. And did it just happen in our bed, too? Or did you at least have enough class to use the guest room? The question was brutal, and I meant it to be. I wanted to strip away every last one of his defenses. Liam closed his eyes, a pained expression on his face. Evelyn, please, answer the question, I commanded, my voice low and dangerous. He wouldn't look at me. He whispered the answer to the slate tiles at his feet. Our bed. The confession hit me like a physical blow to the stomach, but I refused to let him see it. I kept my expression unreadable, my posture rigid. I see, I said, my voice eerily calm. And during this time you were betraying me. Did you ever feel a moment of remorse? Did you ever think about confessing? Or were you just having too much fun at my expense? He didn't answer. His silence was his confession. I'll take your silence as a yes. You are having too much fun, I said, walking over to the table where his wine glass still stood. I picked it up, swirled the remaining red liquid, and then hurled it into the pool, where it shattered against the concrete bottom. The sound sharp and final. You know what makes me the most furious? Liam, I continued, turning back to him. It's not even the affair itself. It's the way you two underestimated me. The arrogance. You both thought I was just the reliable, hardworking doctor. Too busy. Too tired. Too naive to ever figure it out. You thought I was stupid. Liam finally looked up, his face a portrait of defeat. No, Evie. Never. I never thought you were stupid. Don't lie to me. The words ripped out of me, louder than I intended. Not anymore. You counted on my exhaustion. You used my dedication to my patients as a cover for your sordid little games. You stood in this house, the house I paid for, and you laughed with her about me. Don't you dare stand there and tell me you didn't think I was a fool. He lowered his head again, defeated. Evelyn, please, he said, his voice ragged. I messed up. I know I did. But we can fix this. We can go to therapy. We can work through it. The suggestion was so absurd, so insulting, that I laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound that held no joy. Fix this? Liam, look around you. I gestured to the pool, a swirling ecosystem of betrayal and tadpoles. This isn't something you can fix. This is a demolition. You brought the wrecking ball. I'm just cleaning up the rubble. His face crumpled. For the first time, I saw tears welling up in his eyes. But they didn't move me. They were tears of self-pity, not remorse. He was crying for himself, for the perfect life he had just lost, not for the pain he had caused me. I never stopped loving you, he whispered, a desperate last-ditch effort. Love? I scoffed. You don't know the first thing about love. Love isn't bringing another woman into your wife's bed. Love isn't lying to her face every single day. Love isn't making her feel like a stranger in her own home. What you did wasn't about love. It was about ego. It was about selfishness. And now, it's about consequences. I let the word hang in the air, heavy and final. Consequences. It was a word he had clearly never considered. In his charming, easy life, he had always managed to talk his way out of trouble. But not this time. There were no clever words, no charming smiles that could undo what he had done. I watched him stand there, a broken man in the wreckage of the life he had so carelessly destroyed. The satisfaction I thought I would feel wasn't there. There was no triumphant joy, no sweet taste of victory. There was just a vast, empty coldness. The fury had burned itself out, leaving behind only the ashes of what we once had. I knew in that moment that my revenge wasn't just about the frogs and the tadpoles. That was just the theater, the dramatic flourish. The real revenge was this moment right here, forcing him to look at the ugly truth of his actions, without any excuses or escape routes. The real revenge was him finally understanding that he had lost everything, and he had no one to blame but himself. The silence stretched on, filled only by the chirping of crickets in the distance. Liam seemed to shrink before my eyes. The confident, successful architect disappearing, leaving behind a small, pathetic man. He had built our beautiful house, but he had single-handedly demolished our home, and now, he was about to be evicted from the ruins. It's over. Liam, I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. It was over the moment you let her set foot in this house. This was just the official announcement. I turned my back on him and walked toward the house, leaving him alone by the side of the pool, surrounded by the evidence of his betrayal. The show was over. Now it was time to clear the stage. The silence between us was dense, almost palpable. He looked at me, his forehead creased in confusion, trying to understand what was happening, what I meant by him taking a piece of the pool with him. I didn't offer any explanation. Instead, I turned without a word and walked back into the house. The sliding glass door slid shut behind me with a soft whoosh, leaving him outside in the blue-ting night. When I returned, I was carrying something in my hands that he definitely didn't expect. It was a small, rectangular glass aquarium. Inside, dozens of tadpoles were swimming slowly in the clear water, their dark bodies stark against the bare glass. They were silent accomplices to the scene that was about to unfold. Liam's eyes widened in disbelief. "What is that? For God's sake?" he asked, his voice a mixture of confusion and dread. I walked right up to him, close enough that he had to take a step back. Without hesitation, I thrust the aquarium into his hands. It was heavier than it looked, and he fumbled for a moment before getting a firm grip. The gesture was both firm and symbolic. "They're your new traveling companions," I said, my voice as cold and clear as the water in the tank. "Take them with you when you leave." He held the glass with both hands, utterly perplexed. "You're kidding, right, Evie? This is insane." I crossed my arms over my chest and let out a dry, mirthless laugh. "Far from it. Remember how obsessed you were with the pool's cleanliness? How you couldn't stand a single leaf floating on the surface?" I leaned in closer, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Well, now you get to take a little piece of it with you. A reminder." He stared into the aquarium, at the tiny creatures swimming in endless circles, and then back at me. I could see a storm of emotions in his eyes: anger, shame, and maybe, for the first time, a flicker of fear of what I was truly capable of. "Evelyn, stop this. This isn't the time for theatrics. This isn't theater." "Liam," I said, my voice hardening, "this is a final curtain. And this is what you're going to do. You're going to take that backpack over there on the chair. You're going to go inside. And you're going to pack a bag with your essentials. Then you're going to leave my house. Tonight. No scenes. No excuses." His jaw tensed, his knuckles white where he gripped the aquarium. I saw the defiance flare in his eyes, the instinct of a cornered man about to fight back. "And if I don't?" he challenged. I didn't flinch. I had anticipated this. "If you don't leave on your own," I said, my tone as calm as a flat line, "I will call the Maple Creek police, and I will calmly explain to them that there is a man here who is refusing to leave my property. Since the deed to this house is in my name, only a little detail I insisted on when we bought it. Remember? I believe they'll be on my side. I wonder what your clients at the country club would think about you getting a trespassing charge." For a brief moment, I thought he was going to argue. I saw his eyes darting around, looking for an angle, a loophole, trying to turn the game around the way he always did. But there, in that instant, under the harsh lights of the patio, surrounded by the swamp of his own making, he realized he had no power left over me. It was all gone. Everything was finished. Without another word, he carefully placed the aquarium on the stone patio floor. He turned his back on me and walked into the house, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I followed him, standing in the hallway with my arms crossed, a silent sentinel watching over the eviction. I listened to the hurried sounds coming from our bedroom drawers being pulled open and slammed shut, the scrape of hangers on the metal rod of the closet, the zip of a bag. A few minutes later, he reappeared with a backpack slung over his shoulder and a duffel bag in his hand. His face was a bitter mask, the expression of a man who had finally understood he had lost. At the front door, he paused. He turned and gave me one last resentful look. "You'll regret this one day, Evelyn." I offered him a small, tranquil smile, the smile of someone who had found herself again in the wreckage. I highly doubt it. He didn't say anything else. He just bent down, picked up the aquarium from the floor, and held it against his chest. He opened the door and walked out into the night. The door clicked shut behind him with a dry, definitive sound that echoed through the now empty house. Suddenly, everything was quiet. So quiet that my own thoughts seemed deafeningly loud. I walked back through the house to the glass doors overlooking the backyard. I stopped and looked out at the pool. The water, once churned into a frenzy, had settled. The lights cast a soft glow, and the surface was calm, serene. For the first time in months, I felt that same sense of peace inside myself. I closed my eyes and took a deep, cleansing breath. The lies were over. It was finally, truly over. Outside, the night was cool. Liam walked down the empty sidewalk, dragging his feet. In one hand, he carried his duffel bag, and in the other, the small aquarium of tadpoles. The glass swayed slightly with his movements, and the slow, wriggling dance of the tiny creatures seemed to mock what he had become, a man expelled, humiliated, forced to carry a living symbol of his own disgrace. The cold wind bit at his face, and I knew, with every fiber of my being, that this scene would be forever seared into his memory, not because of the object itself, but because of what it represented. The aquarium wasn't just a trophy of his shame. It was a clear, slashing reminder that the filth he had spread had come back to him. In the loneliest hour of the night, he thought he would have somewhere to run. That in the midst of the chaos, Chloe, at least, would open her arms to him. After all, she had been so eager, so available, when everything was still a secret. But that was just an illusion. When Liam arrived at her apartment building in Cambridge, it was already past midnight. He buzzed her apartment, his finger pressing down hard, as if seeking shelter or redemption. On the other end, he heard a groggy, annoyed voice. "Who is it?" "It's me. Chloe. Let me in." There was a long pause. "Liam, what are you doing here? Just buzz me in. Please, I need to see you." The lobby door buzzed open, and he hurried inside. He took the elevator up to the 3rd floor. He found her standing in her doorway. The door only open a few inches, held by a security chain. She was wearing silk pajamas, her face scrubbed clean of makeup. She looked irritated. "What do you want?" she snapped, her voice sharp. He tried to maintain some semblance of his former composure, even with his shoulders slumped and the ridiculous aquarium still clutched in his hands. "Chloe, I have nowhere to go." She let out a short, humorless laugh. "You don't say." "Funny. When it was time to defend me, to protect me from that absurd scene, you had nothing to say. You just stood there like an idiot." Liam looked away, ashamed. "She found out everything. She kicked me out. She threw tadpoles at you." "Chloe. Tadpoles? Do you think I'm okay?" She arched an eyebrow. "And what does that have to do with me? Do you think it was pleasant for me, leaving like that, with slime in my hair and your neighbors probably watching? I nearly had a heart attack in that pool." She wasn't concerned for him. She was angry about her own humiliation. "I just need a place to stay," he pleaded, his voice desperate. "Just for one night. I'll figure something out tomorrow." She was silent for a few seconds, but her eyes said everything. "Do you really think I'm going to take in a man who's become a laughingstock? Who got kicked out of his own house and showed up at my door smelling of chlorine and carrying a ridiculous fish tank?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The weight of his shame was a physical thing. Chloe took a step forward, her face hardening. She pushed his chest with the tip of her finger through the gap in the door. "Go away, Liam. Get out of my sight." The door slammed shut in his face, and there he was, standing in the hallway of her apartment building, staring at the welcome mat as if it were the only ground he had left to stand on. With a heavy sigh, he took out his phone and made the one call he had been dreading. The call to the only person left who couldn't completely turn him away. "Mom," he said, his voice cracking slightly. Can I spend the night?" Liam arrived at his mother's house in a quiet, older neighborhood of Somerville around 2 a.m. It was the house he'd grown up in, a modest colonial that seemed to shrink with every passing year. He was soaked from a light drizzle that had started to fall, shivering, with his backpack on, his duffel bag in one hand, and that damn aquarium still in the other. He felt the weight of the street silence, the cold wind on his face, but nothing hurt as much as his wounded pride. He rang the doorbell hesitantly, praying his mother wasn't a heavy sleeper. After a few seconds, he heard the familiar shuffle of slippers across the hardwood floor. The porch light flickered on, and the door creaked open. There she was, Margaret Vance, wearing an old, faded blue housecoat, her gray hair in disarray, her eyes sharp and suspicious even through a sleepy haze. She stared at him for 2 long seconds, taking in his pathetic state. Then she crossed her arms. Again. No. Liam. Was it the bar or the casino this time? I told you I'm not bailing you out anymore. Liam rolled his eyes, a flash of his old petulance showing through. Mom. I just need to come inside. That's all. That depends, she said, her sharp gaze falling on the aquarium. What in God's name is that? She pointed at it, clearly trying to figure out if her son had finally lost his mind completely. Liam closed his eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath before answering. Evelyn found out. His mother went quiet for a moment, and for a fleeting second, he thought it might be out of pity. He was sorely mistaken. She let out a laugh. It started as a low chuckle and quickly grew into a full-throated cackle, the kind that makes a person double over and cry from the sheer absurdity of it all. She held her stomach, stumbled against her own laughter, and had to lean on the doorframe for support. Oh, Liam, you are a walking punchline, she said between gasps of air. What on earth is this situation? You show up here looking like a drowned rat, and you bring that. She gestured with her chin toward the aquarium. They're tadpoles. Mom, he said, his voice flat with exhaustion. They're tadpoles. That only made her laugh harder. Tadpoles. Oh, dear Lord. That's the most creative punishment I've ever heard of in my life. She's a genius. That wife of yours. I always knew she was too smart for you. Liam's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. Are you going to help me or not? His mother finally managed to control her laughter, wiping a tear from her eye. She sighed, shaking her head, a smile still playing on her lips. Get in. Get in. But you are telling me this whole story, from start to finish. I want every juicy detail. Liam stumbled inside and collapsed onto the familiar floral pattern sofa, while his mother went to the kitchen. She came back not with tea for him, but with a cup for herself. She sat down in her favorite armchair, took a deliberate sip, and looked at him expectantly. All right. Explain. Liam ran a hand over his face, exasperated. Evelyn found out everything. The affair. Chloe. The nights at the pool. His mother listened with rapt attention as he recounted the entire humiliating saga. The tadpoles. The frogs. Chloe's panic. The moment I had appeared like a vengeful goddess from the shadows. When he finished, she started laughing again. A quieter, more appreciative chuckle this time. Well deserved, she said, nodding. Truly. Did you really think you'd get away with it? With a woman like Evelyn? You, my son. Maybe a decent architect. But you are a terrible criminal. Liam muttered something unintelligible and set the aquarium on the coffee table. The tadpole swam placidly, oblivious to the drama they had caused. I don't know what to do with these things, he said miserably. His mother picked up the aquarium and looked at the tadpole swimming calmly. We'll release them in the Mystic River, she said matter-of-factly. At least something good can come out of your foolishness. Give them a chance at a better life. Despite being completely exhausted, Liam knew he couldn't just leave them there. So, the two of them, the disgraced son and his amused mother, left the house and walked a few blocks to a small park that bordered the river. The air was cool and fresh after the rain, and the water reflected the faint, distant lights of the city. Without ceremony, his mother took the aquarium and gently poured the tadpoles and the water into the river. There, she said, handing the empty tank back to him. At least they have a better future than you do right now. Liam didn't respond. He just stood there, staring at the dark, moving water, thinking about everything he had lost. His perfect house, his beautiful wife, his exciting mistress, his self-respect. All of it. Gone. Swallowed up by the consequences of his own selfish choices. Time passed, and with it, I began to find myself again. I started slowly. I changed the curtains, painted the walls colors he would have hated, and said goodbye to the heavy, modern furniture that carried too many memories. The pool, which had once been the stage for my pain, did not remain. I had it filled in. I hired a landscape designer, a kind woman with dirt under her fingernails and a vision for healing. In its place, a garden was born, a Japanese Zen garden, filled with smooth white stones, carefully pruned maples, a small stone lantern, and a simple wooden bench where I liked to sit and read, or simply think of nothing at all. I had created a space that was just for me. A refuge where I felt safe and light again. I allowed myself to meet new people. Not with the intention of replacing Liam, but with the goal of rediscovering myself. I accepted invitations from colleagues, joined a book club, and made new friends. I rediscovered the pleasure of living without having to justify my time or my choices to anyone. It was like breathing freely after being held underwater for a very long time. I was no longer just a surgeon or a wife. I was Evelyn. And that was enough. As for Liam, he ended up exactly where he had always feared he would be, stagnant, trapped, without enough money to rent a place of his own after the legal fees from the divorce, and without the courage to face the people who once admired him and now whispered behind his back. He continued to live with his mother. He spent his days sunk into the same floral pattern sofa, watching his career wither as his reputation in the small, insular world of Boston architecture crumbled. And his mother, with that direct, no-nonsense New England way of hers, would look at him over her morning coffee and say, with a complete lack of sympathy, "You made your bed, son. Now lie in it." And so, everything came to an end. With heartbreak, a healthy dose of vengeance, and some small tadpoles being given a new chance at life, I found my path, rebuilt my life with dignity and grace. Liam, on the other hand, had to face the consequences of everything he had done, with no excuses and no hiding places. In the end, life goes on. But tell me something. Who really came out ahead in the story? The little tadpoles, set free in a new home, or the man who lost everything because he didn't know how to value what he had? Let me know what you think in the comments. My story didn't end with the closing of a door and the quiet hum of an empty house. That was just the end of a chapter. The real work, the work of rebuilding, began in the silence that followed. For the first few weeks, the house felt too big, too quiet. Every room held an echo of him, a ghost of a memory. The hardest part was the backyard. I couldn't even look at the pool without feeling a fresh wave of nausea. It was a beautiful, expensive monument to my own foolishness, a crystal-clear tombstone for my marriage. So, I got rid of it. It was a radical decision, one that made the real estate agent I consulted gasp in horror. "Dr. Reed, a pool like this adds significant value to the property," she'd exclaimed. I just smiled and said, "To me, its value is negative." The day the work crew arrived with their jackhammers was one of the most satisfying days of my life. I sat on the patio with a cup of coffee and watched them break apart the concrete, shattering the pristine blue tiles into 1,000 pieces. It was loud, messy, and wonderfully cathartic. With every crack and crumble, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. I was literally dismantling the stage of my humiliation. In its place, I built my sanctuary. The scent of fresh mulch and damp earth replaced a chemical bite of chlorine. The sound of birds replaced the hum of the pool filter. My Zen garden became my therapy. I learned the names of the plants, the delicate lace-leaf Japanese maple, the sturdy boxwoods, the moss that grew between the stepping stones. Tending to it became a ritual, a form of meditation. My hands, so used to the sterile environment of the operating room, found a different kind of healing in the soil. I wasn't fixing broken hearts anymore. I was nurturing new life. I was nurturing my own. My life outside the garden began to bloom as well. I started saying yes more. Yes to after-work drinks with my fellow surgeons, where I discovered that beneath their professional exteriors, they were funny, complicated people with their own stories of heartbreak and resilience. Yes to joining the neighborhood book club, where I found a circle of intelligent, supportive women who debated literary themes with the same passion I reserved for cardiovascular techniques. We talked about books, but we also talked about life, about starting over, about the strength we find when we think we have none left. One afternoon, I was having coffee with a friend, another doctor from the hospital. When she mentioned she had seen Liam, it was the strangest thing. She said, stirring her latte, "I was at a hardware store with my husband, and I saw him in the plumbing aisle with his mother. He looked deflated, and she was lecturing him about the proper way to fix a leaky faucet. It was quite a scene." I just nodded. A small, sad smile on my face. That was the picture of his life now. Small, domestic errands under the watchful, critical eye of his mother. The brilliant, charming architect who once designed custom homes was now struggling to fix a sink. I'd heard through mutual acquaintances that his firm had let him go. The scandal, though quiet, had been potent enough to tarnish his reputation. No one wanted to hire an architect whose personal life was a demolition site. He had become a local cautionary tale. The man who had it all and threw it away. I saw him one more time. About a year after he left. I was driving through Somerville after visiting a friend. It was a gray Saturday afternoon. And there he was, walking out of a small grocery store, carrying a single paper bag. He looked older than his years. His shoulders were stooped. His once stylish clothes were rumpled. And his face had a permanent expression of weary resignation. He wasn't looking where he was going, and almost bumped into a woman pushing a stroller. He mumbled an apology without making eye contact and shuffled on his way. The man I had loved, the man whose betrayal had nearly broken me, was gone. In his place was a sad, gray stranger. And I felt nothing. Not anger. Not pity. Not even the faint ghost of love. It was like looking at an old medical chart for a patient who had long since been discharged. The case was closed. He had no more power over me. I pressed my foot on the accelerator and drove away. My eyes on the road ahead, not on the man shrinking in my rearview mirror. My life is quiet now. But it's a good quiet. It's the quiet of a house that is truly a home. It's the quiet of a heart that is at peace. Sometimes, on warm summer evenings, I sit on the bench in my garden, listen to the crickets, and think about the tadpoles. I wonder how many of them grew into frogs, finding their own way in the big river. They were instruments of my revenge. Yes, but they were also innocent creatures caught in the crossfire of human messiness. In a way, their story is a happier one. They were liberated from a small, toxic tank and set free into a world of possibility. And in the end, so was I. He thought he was the architect of our lives, but he only ever knew how to build facades. I learned how to tear them down and plant a garden in the ruins. I found out that sometimes, the most beautiful things grow from the most painful endings.